Alright guys, so Israel is continuing with their war on journalists who have been attempting to shed at least a little bit of light on the absolute atrocities unfolding in Gaza right now. So earlier today, we get this story that the Israeli communications minister has ordered the return of seized camera equipment to the Associated Press, an American outlet, okay? So let's go ahead and read some of the details here. They say, Israel's communications minister has ordered the government to return a camera and broadcasting equipment that it seized from the Associated Press, reversing course hours after blocking the news organization's live video of Gaza. And keep in mind, guys, they're talking about, like, I think what was a stationary camera that just had a general overview of the north of Gaza. We're not even talking about, like, an actual camera crew that was stationed on the ground inside of Gaza, because Israel won't allow foreign journalists to go into Gaza, right? And they've also at the same time been killing Palestinian journalists in Gaza at a historic pace. And we'll get to more on that here in a minute. But they basically just seized this camera equipment that was just giving a view of the north of Gaza, kind of just showing the smoke from the endless bombs dropping from the sky. They continue, though. They say, the government seized the Associated Press equipment from a location in southern Israel after accusing it of violating a new media law by providing images to the satellite channel Al Jazeera. Israeli officials used the new law on May 5th to close down the Israel office's Qatar-based Al Jazeera, confiscating its equipment and banning its broadcasts as well as blocking its websites. So we have just a full-blown crackdown mode going on right now inside of Israel against any outlet that is daring to be critical of the Israeli government and of this genocide in any way, shape, and form, right? The banning of Al Jazeera, it has nothing to do with, oh, they're a mouthpiece of Hamas and they're putting Israel in danger or something. No, they're just exposing your crimes, okay? And Al Jazeera has been doing some fantastic work on the ground in that effort. And in the meantime, Israel has also been targeting and killing not only Al Jazeera journalists, but also the families of Al Jazeera journalists, okay? So that's what's actually been going on here. And now they're using the same law that they passed to go after Al Jazeera to now go after even American outlets. I mean, it's just totally insane. It's a fantastic democracy, right? The only democracy in the Middle East, apparently, where you're not allowed to criticize the government, though. They say, after Israel seized the AP equipment, the Biden administration, journalism organizations, and an Israeli opposition leader condemned the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and pressured it to reverse the decision. Israel's communication minister, Shlomo Kari, said the defense ministry will undertake a review of the news outlet's positioning of live video of Gaza. Officials never told the Associated Press that the positioning of its live camera was an issue when they took it down earlier in the day. And we got a quote here from an Associated Press vice president. He says, while we are pleased with this development, we remain concerned about the Israeli government's use of the foreign broadcaster law and the ability of independent journalists to operate freely in Israel. Now, something that this reminded me of was this strike that I covered now 3 years ago, back in May of 2021, where Israel completely obliterated, flattened to the ground, an Associated Press building inside of Gaza that was hosting other media outlets as well, I believe including Al Jazeera. And at the time, they gave absolutely no justification for why they did this. I think later on they ended up giving some vague justification of, like, Hamas was in the building or something like that. Just completely pulled it out of their ass, never provided any evidence whatsoever. But they flattened the AP building, right? And there was some, uproar at the time, but I remember being really underwhelmed with even the AP response to them flattening their building. It was just almost as if, like, they believed the Israeli propaganda at the time. Now, just a couple of paragraphs reminding us of this story, and then we'll continue on the rest of that first one. They say here, an Israeli airstrike targeted and destroyed a high-rise building in Gaza City that housed the offices of the Associated Press and other media outlets hours after another Israeli air raid on a densely populated refugee camp killed at least 10 Palestinians from an extended family, mostly children. Sound familiar? They say the strike on the high-rise came nearly an hour after the military ordered people to evacuate the 12-story building, which also housed Al Jazeera, other offices, and residential apartments. The strike brought down the entire structure, which collapsed in a gigantic cloud of dust. There was no immediate explanation for why this was done. So, I mean, again, none of this is new. This has been going on for years and years and years. So anybody who's trying to convince you like, well, this is all in an effort to protect IDF troops, and, you know, this is part of our strategy in combating incitement of terrorism, or whatever the case may be, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. We've seen them do this for years and years and years. They continue. So Shlomo Kari is the minister who later ordered the equipment to be returned, I guess after there was some backlash and some mild pushback behind the scenes. So he ordered the equipment to be returned to the Associated Press. Shortly before its equipment was seized on Tuesday, the AP was broadcasting a general view of northern Gaza. The AP complies with Israel's military censorship rules, which are totally insane and the absolute antithesis to actually having a free press if you have literal military censorship of the content that Western media outlets are able to put out there. And also remember that reporting of the CNN anchors and you know their entire organization basically having to send all of their reporting through their Jerusalem bureau that was also under the shadow of an IDF censor. Okay, so this is the kind of information that Israel is allowing to get out. And they say this also prohibits broadcasts of details like troop movements that could endanger soldiers. I mean, again, the idea that that's what this is about, really, they were endangering troop movements by showing like a wide angle view of northern Gaza to just show some of the explosions going off inside of the strip. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. Now, Israel's opposition leader, Yair Lapid, called the move against the AP an act of madness. He said, "This is not Al Jazeera. This is an American news outlet. This government acts as if it has decided to make sure, at any cost, that Israel will be shunned all over the world." So this last statement, I think, is 100% true. Yeah, that's what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing. And he has his own personal reasons to not, ever bring about an end to the war, to not do a hostage deal, etc., to protect his own ass, to keep himself in power, to keep himself out of jail. We all understand that. So that part of it is true. They are making themselves into a global pariah right now with their own actions. But then also notice, I mean, this is the so-called Israel opposition leader. This guy is no dove, okay? He agrees fully with the war and the genocide in Gaza. He is fully complicit in that. So let's not get this twisted. And you'll also notice at the top here, he says, this is not Al Jazeera, giving the indication that he supports the crackdown, the elimination of Al Jazeera being able to even function, okay, inside of Israel. So, I mean, again, not exactly the best source, right? It's hard to even call him an opposition leader because I don't know how much of the substance of the occupation and the apartheid that he actually, and the genocide that he disagrees with Benjamin Netanyahu, that the daylight between them on those things is not much, but he's not Benjamin Netanyahu, so I guess that makes him the opposition leader, right? And then Shlomo Kari responded to him and said that the law passed unanimously by the government states that any device used to deliver Al Jazeera content could be seized. So not only are they cracking down on Al Jazeera as an organization, but if you even, as a part of your hundreds of contracts with different organizations around the world with your live video feed camera, if you even tangentially, okay, support Al Jazeera by like leasing them footage, then we can also go after you. I mean, this is totally insane, guys. Totally insane. Now, the Biden administration response to this, that I saw at least from Karine Jean-Pierre, was basically like a finger wag. Now, maybe that was enough. Maybe this was so egregious that they had to kind of like immediately reverse course because this was going to become a big story. But it was basically just a finger wag. Okay, it's not as if they brought some massive pressure down on Israel. Now, again, just as a reminder, not only have they been cracking down on media outlets like Al Jazeera and now the Associated Press, but they've also been killing Palestinian journalists. Again, they do not allow for foreign journalists to go and to report freely inside of Gaza. In fact, if Western journalists did try to go and report freely inside of Gaza, there's a high degree of likelihood that they would be targeted and killed by the IDF, right? But I mean, just some figures here, and this article is from January, so this is already months out of date. But in the first 10 weeks of this war, Israel killed more journalists in Gaza than in any other single country in an entire year, ever. Okay, so it is a historic pace that they have been killing and targeting journalists. And you can see, I believe this is the one of the Al Jazeera journalists who basically lost his entire family to Israeli strikes. Now, we also have on top of that more crackdowns that have been happening since the beginning of this, right? This is an article all the way back in November of 2023. And the article headline here is the right to free speech being curbed in Israel amid the war with Hamas? Well, yeah, surprise, surprise. Now, I want to show you guys just one example from this article to give you a perspective on what's been happening domestically inside of Israel, okay, against their own population, right, in some of these crackdowns. So they've basically been trying to censor any sort of speech, not that's in support of October 7th or that's in support of Hamas, but just any sort of sympathy with Palestinians in general, or even questioning the war. So here from this article, they say, as the war between Israel and Hamas rages, there's a battle being fought inside Israel over freedom of expression. Rights groups and lawyers say that there's a crackdown on speech that is resulting in dozens of people being fired from their jobs, disciplined by or expelled from their universities, and even arrested, often for posts on social media in support of Palestinians or critical of Israel's operations in Gaza. We got a quote here. They say, we're not talking about people who are supporting the terrifying acts of October 7th, but we're talking about people who are trying to look at the Palestinian cause. Okay, and this was according to a lawyer who works for the Palestinian-run legal aid organization, Adullah, based in Israel's third largest city of Haifa. Okay, and so this is one of the examples they cite. One of these students, a Palestinian with Israeli citizenship, so this is an Israeli citizen we're talking about here, who wanted to remain anonymous due to ongoing disciplinary proceedings at her college, posted 2 stories to her private Instagram account in the weeks after the Hamas attack that supported not Hamas, but international protests against the war and condemned Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. The posts were reported to her university, and she was suspended pending a hearing to determine if she will be expelled. So immediate suspension. That's the gut instinct. You're immediately going to be suspended, and we're going to investigate you for what? Not for saying, let's go Hamas, I love October 7th, not for anything like that, but just for questioning the war, for being against the bombing of children in Gaza. That's what sparked this off. And they got a quote. They say, we suspect that you support a terrorism attack or group, so we would like to invite you to a hearing session so that you can say what you have to say. And we will agree after that what we will do to you. I mean, is this not terrifying? She said that she was brought before a committee made up of members or made up of a number of her own teachers. She says, I was trying to explain to them I was against the terrorism attack, October 7th, and I'm genuinely against anyone getting hurt, getting murdered, anything violent. They won't listen. I wanted to tell them, most of you knew me, but do you want to listen to me now? Why? Is it because I'm a Muslim woman? I'm not from the same religion. I don't look like you. Why? Is it because of that? And they won't listen. The committee later ruled that the students' posts amounted to support for, or at the very least, identification with terrorist activities. And the student was suspended for a semester, with their return after that time conditional upon further conversations with the university. I mean, think about this, guys. Terrorist activities. Terrorist incitement, terrorist sympathies for what? For criticizing Israeli airstrikes that vastly disproportionately have been killing innocent women and children. So this is what's been going on for 6-7 months straight now inside of Israel. To pretend as if they have anything remotely resembling free speech is delusional, okay? Utterly delusional. Now, at the same time that all of this is happening in Israel, right? We also have similar stuff happening here in the United States. So this was absolutely wild. Here from Jeremy Scahill, famed historian, and I can never pronounce his name correctly, but I think it's Ilan Pappé, okay, says that he was detained on Monday at a Detroit airport and was questioned by federal agents, as well as had his phone copied. This is one of the most well-respected and informed Israeli historians in modern history. Okay, this isn't just some random guy. It's certainly not a guy who has any affiliations with Hamas or with terrorism or whatever else. He's a historian, one of the most famous Israeli historians of all time. And this is what he says happened to him. He says, did you know that 70-year-old professors of history are threatening American national security? I arrived on Monday at the Detroit airport and was taken for a 2-hour investigation by the FBI. And my phone was taken as well. The 2-men team were not abusive or rude, I should say, but their questions were really out of the world. Am I a Hamas supporter? Do I regard Israeli actions in Gaza as genocide? What is the solution to the conflict? Guys, the FBI is detaining historians, 70-year-old professors at the airport, and then asking them questions about whether or not they think Israel is committing a genocide. What the fuck are we doing? What is this? I mean, this is horrifying. This is terrifying that question would come out of the mouth of a federal agent towards somebody like this at an airport, as if he is a terrorist. This is utter madness, utter insanity. You know, he says, who are my Arab and Muslim friends in America? How long do I know them? What kind of relationship do I have with them? So we're just doing like a blanket cover of all Muslims and Arabs in the United States. I mean, this is the kind of shit that happened in the aftermath of 9/11 and the war on terror. Is you had a bunch of Muslims, many of whom were actually like set up by the feds and then later arrested for crimes that the feds were trying to encourage them to commit in sort of entrapment situations. And you had mass surveillance of Muslim Americans and Arab Americans here in the United States. This is the same shit as that. I mean, they're asking, who are your Arab and Muslim friends in America? What kind of relationship do you have with them? Is the implication there that he has a terrorist connection with them? I mean, he continues, is some cases I sent them to my books, and in some cases I answered laconically yes or no. They had long phone conversations with someone, the Israelis, ? And after copying everything on my phone allowed me to enter. They copied his phone, guys. This is outrageous. This is one of the most outrageous things that I've seen in terms of censorship over the last couple of months. I mean, we've seen bills that have been passed that classify, you know, criticism of Zionism or criticism of Israel as anti-Semitism. We've seen, you know, a whole host of different crackdowns. We saw Rashida Tlaib get censured in Congress. The only Palestinian American member of the House of Representatives got censured for saying, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, even after explaining exactly what she meant by that. Still got censured. I mean, we've seen this kind of shit over and over and over again. But this is taking it to an entirely different level, right? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I went to the airport and they stopped me based on my commentary on this channel. I mean, genuinely, is that where we're at right now? And I'll finish off with this. Just another, you know, insane situation happening here in the United States. This was video obtained by the FIRE organization, which is, you know, a free speech organization here in the United States. And this came after Governor Greg Abbott in Texas, his executive order targeting student demonstrators. UT San Antonio administrators filmed themselves telling students that if they chant from the river to the sea, they will be reported to law enforcement. Let's go ahead and listen to this.
As well, this will be our official record of recording here. You're welcome to as well. So the executive order states that language such as from the river to the sea is considered anti-Semitic speech. And so we're asking for folks to refrain from that because we are required to enforce that is not language that's used.
And enforcement is by means of expulsion?
No. Okay. I am asking you all not to use that language.
Yes.
And we ask that you all comply with that. If you do not, we explain it 2 more times. And then if you continue to not comply with that, we will refer you over to the law enforcement agencies that are in our area.
Okay. Thank you.
So we would greatly appreciate that you comply.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
LT, I did notice that.
Okay, those students, credit to them for keeping themselves contained. I would not be able to contain myself in that kind of a situation. And this is happening at, I believe, UT Austin, which I think, or this is UT San Antonio. So I'm not sure if this is a public institution or a private institution. But either way, we have them saying that according to Greg Abbott's executive order, that they cannot use a specific political slogan on campus, not under the threat of expulsion, not under the threat of any sort of like academic punishment, under the threat of being arrested by the police. If this is not a direct, unconstitutional, straight up violation of the First Amendment, then I don't know what is. You have people who are protesting the government and their universities' complicity in a genocide, and then the government is stepping in and saying, you cannot say this phrase. You cannot say this phrase. Why? Is it because it's a direct threat of violence? No. Because that actually would arguably be a, you know, something you could arrest somebody for if you're saying, I'm going to kill you to somebody, right? That's something that would be, you know, an abridgment of the First Amendment standards. But that's not what they're saying. They're saying you can't say that phrase because Governor Greg Abbott has determined it to be anti-Semitic. That's what he's saying. Which obviously, number one, it's not anti-Semitic. They're not using it in an anti-Semitic way. But number two, I mean, honestly, even if it was, Isn't that what free speech is supposed to be about? I mean, you should be able to say abhorrent shit. I mean, this is why I agree with even racist people going out and chanting racist things in public spaces. I don't agree with what they're saying, obviously, but I agree with their right to do that without being violently cracked down upon by the state. The whole point of having a First Amendment, the whole point of having free speech principles is that you're supposed to be able to take it to the farthest edges, right? As long as you're not engaging in direct threats of violence, you should be able to take it to the farthest edges. It's very easy to agree with free speech when people are saying something you agree with. It's not so easy when they're saying something that you think is horrifying, or you think is wrong, or you think is bigoted. But those are the times where you have to stand up for free speech, or else you don't have free speech. And believe me, whoever's, supporting this kind of an executive order from Greg Abbott, a bunch of conservatives, right? These so-called free speech warriors who suddenly flipped on a dime when it comes to criticizing Israel. All of these policies will come back for you. This can be used in the reverse, right? I mean, if you're saying you'll be arrested for using a phrase that we've deemed to be anti-Semitic, well then what's to say any other, any other sort of phrase that conservatives have used at protests, right? Make America great again. Is that, well, I think that's a racist phrase. You're hearkening back to a time when we had segregation in this country, whatever. You can make any sort of argument and just say, I think that's a racist phrase. I'm banning it by executive order, and I'm going to sic the police on you if you use that. Then where are we at? I mean, guys, this is a terrifying situation that we are finding ourselves in right now. I've never seen the US government be this unified in their censorship efforts, in their gaslighting, in their brutal crackdowns, in their smears and lies. It is utterly deranged, the place that we have currently found ourselves in. All for what? To prevent criticism of a foreign government that's in the midst of committing a genocide, an ongoing ethnic cleansing, an apartheid state that is also cracking down domestically on their own free speech. And it's all for that? This is what we're doing? We're going around and beating college students for daring to protest against a genocide, against war crimes. This is where we're at, apparently, in this country. So, I mean, there you have it. It only seems to be getting more and more alarming by the day.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying